All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Astacia, if you want to go ahead and start recording. Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claudia Riegel. I'm the director of the City of New Orleans Mosquito and Termite Control Board, and we are starting our public health education series of Vector Preparedness. So very excited about this. And it's a three-part series, and today we're very excited to have Mr. Collin Arnold with us. But we're also going to be talking about April 4th. We're going to be doing vector control preparedness. And then we're also on May 2nd going to have another section of the role of public health in the preparedness before and after hazards. Before we get started, just a couple of reminders. Please mute your line. You want to go ahead and keep it muted. If you have any questions or that you'd like to ask our speaker or any kind of issues, please place that question or comment in the chat box. We'll be monitoring it throughout the entire webinar. And we're going to hold all the questions till the very end of the presentation. But please, put it in there. We'd like to have healthy discussions at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions that have not been answered by our speaker, if you don't, put your question in today and you think of something later, just send us your question to education@nola.gov and we'll make sure to forward it to our speaker to give you that answer. Today's presentation, as well as the other two in the series, have been approved for Louisiana state sanitarians. We will download the attendance list, the time that you entered and the time that you left. And so it's important to attend the entire session to receive credit. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Collin Arnold. He's the director of the New Orleans Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. Been working with Collin for many years, so very exciting. And just so everyone knows, that office is the coordinating office for public safety for the city of New Orleans. And they're responsible for administering the city's crisis and consequent management program. That office coordinates the city's preparedness and response to an all hazards event. So I know just from experience with working with Collin, it was potentially Zika to, other, COVID-19. Those are some of the public health issues, but I know that there have been many others as well. Collin has worked for the city of New Orleans for over 23 years. He's worked at the police department, operations management at the Louis Armstrong International Airport. He was appointed by our mayor in May of 2018 for the current position. But he also has lots of private sector experience working in transportation, from aviation and rail. Many may not know, but he is a licensed commercial pilot and flight instructor as well, with airline experience, and he's also a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard. Collin is also a certified emergency manager with the International Association of Emergency Managers, a professional Louisiana emergency manager as well. And he's done quite a lot of work, obviously, with FEMA and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Collin, and he's going to talk a lot about, Homeland Security and preparedness, and what I think everyone really should know. Collin.
Thank you, Dr. Riegel. Thanks for having me, and always happy to do these educational webinars. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes.
I hope so. So we're going to talk about the Homeland Security Enterprise today, which is a fancy way of saying what my office does and how we, the role that we perform within city government and the role that we perform in conjunction and collaboration with our other local partners like the Mosquito Control Board and also our state and federal partners. So as Dr. Riegel mentioned, the role of NOSEP is to administer the crisis and consequence management program for the city of New Orleans, utilizing state and federal guidelines. What those are is the National Incident Management System, referred to as NIMS, and also the Incident Command System. So we are a NIMS and ICS compliant department, meaning that we in times of disaster, in times of trouble, but also, some in our city, fortunately, in times of large special events and public gatherings, we're able to come together and put together an organization that allows us to address whatever that incident or event may be, to try and stabilize it. If it's a bad thing, we want to minimize it as much as possible, stabilize the situation, protect life, and to the greatest extent possible, protect property and the environment as well. You see in this slide here, this is a mayor's briefing. A lot of my office's role is coordination. We bring together the varying agencies, departments, both locally and within the state and the federal government. We bring those people together into a common space where ideas can be exchanged, information can be exchanged, and ideally problems can be addressed and hopefully solved. So we work in an all hazards environment, meaning that we recognize there are a few threats that are out there that are very specific to New Orleans as far as our priorities. Obviously, one of those, and I think the biggest, is flooding. And I would say, as an aside to that, the flooding caused by tropical weather, whether it be a tropical storm or a major hurricane, and also infrastructure issues. We've seen in 2017, we had some flooding issues caused again by weather, but exacerbated by infrastructure challenges that had to be addressed. And so my office's role is to, when these things occur, bring folks together to, again, share information. That information, may be extremely valuable in ending whatever the crisis is. That information may save lives. That information may mitigate challenges that we have. And then also in the event of like a major special event, like a Super Bowl or, NBA All-Star game or Sugar Bowl, any of these larger types of incidents, Mardi Gras events, I should say, helps us bring a successful event conclusion to the city. We don't necessarily focus, though. You don't write a plan for very, specific types of things. We could write a hurricane plan, but the truth is that when you look at a hurricane, it has some of the same hallmarks and same, issues that you may have with another flooding incident, that you may have with a chemical or biological materials release, hazardous materials release. And even when you look at special events, we typically say that special events are disasters with less notice. We typically host an event hoping that nothing bad happens, but when if something is happening that is negative, we need to address that the same way we would as if we had a hurricane. So when you talk about all hazards, what we're really saying is you have to prepare kind of for everything, and you don't really know. You don't know what you know until it happens. And so the idea is preparing for any type of situation that would come about, and then adapting those plans as necessary for specifics. And under all hazards, we work in 4 different kind of functional areas. We prepare for incidents and events. When those things happen, we respond to them. After they're over, a very important piece of this is how do we recover from these? And then one of the aspects that kind of overarches all of these is mitigation. And what mitigation is, in our sense, is we've just been affected by this incident. We've had this, very successful special event. What can we take from that to learn from for next time, whether it's positive or negative? And so that's why it's really important when we do these, that afterwards, as part of your recovery, you have a very, very explorative after action review, what we call an AAR, and you develop an improvement plan from that. and you acknowledge the things you did well, but you want to spend more time ideally on the things that maybe didn't go as well, or the things that happened that maybe weren't planned, and try and address those for the next time. And so that's the 4 areas that we work within. So moving right into preparedness, we maintain a large library or menu, if you will, of plans for the city. They're guided under the city's Comprehensive Emergency Operations Plan, or CEOP. It's a pretty exhaustive plan. Like I said, it's all hazards. A lot of times the media will call and say, we want your hurricane plan. Well, this is the plan they get, the Emergency Operations Plan, because under the Emergency Operations Plan, we can shelter, we can look at flooding and infrastructure issues, we can address medical concerns, we can address security concerns. It's all contained within the plan. That plan's reviewed every year. We're looking at right now doing a rewrite of it. It's been about 7 years since we've had a rewrite. And so with COVID, hopefully in our rearview mirror and able to move on to priorities that we may have had before the pandemic, we want to get back on track with having this plan, bringing in some experts, utilizing the experience that we have within my office, and rewriting this plan. And so that's something that I would anticipate seeing within the next year or two. On both sides of those, we have a hazard mitigation plan, which is required that we rewrite every 5 years. We just went through that process with FEMA last year for our hazard mitigation plan. We also now have a comprehensive recovery framework that we debuted at the end of last year. And it is a plan built off of some of the lessons learned from other peer cities that we reviewed. One in particular is Christchurch in New Zealand. When they were dealing with their earthquake, they put in place a recovery plan that we looked at and admired very much, and wanted to use some of what they learned, particularly in the area of community feedback in recovery and community engagement. And so we went through a process of engaging stakeholders in the community, from both faith-based nonprofits, neighborhood associations, and others, and gauged kind of where the city was in recovery planning, and what we were hearing out on the street from people in the city about what their priorities were. And we're able to match some of those things up, quite a few actually. And so in the future, if we do have, and this would be for a really major event, major impacts from a devastating hurricane, something like that, we anticipate being able to use this recovery plan to assist us in recovering faster. I think it can't be understated that the importance of recovery. It's what gets people back in their homes. It's what gets businesses going again and reopened. It's what gets the economy moving. And I think we know that the longer that is delayed and the longer that sits, the more of an issue that it becomes. But you see underneath the City Emergency Operations Plan, we've got several other plans that we either engage with departments in. We ask for departments to have their own semblance of an emergency plan, and that's mainly for their records and for their people. Most importantly, we ask for accountability from our departments for their employees and their employees' families. It's not necessarily direct type aid or anything of that nature. It potentially could be, depending on the disaster, but it's really more about accountability, about knowing, making sure our employees, just like we ask our residents and businesses in the city to do, we ask our employees to have their own personal emergency plan as well. And so we've made quite a bit of development on that in the last few years. A lot of that out of necessity with 2 major hurricanes in 2020 and 2021, and then also obviously a cyber attack which crippled the city, and the Hard Rock Hotel collapse, which was a pretty intense event that went on for several months. And then also clearly the pandemic, knowing where our employees were. We had people working remotely. We had a lot of the different restrictions that were in at the time that the city, had to comply with as well. And so, a lot of these types of incidents have kind of brought us around to where we are now, which is, working on more of an online database that we keep all of our employees' personal emergency plans in. One of the plans that we are very proud of, and also which makes us stand out a little and is a little unique, is the city's city assisted evacuation plan. Now, this could be used for anything. Again, we're talking about all hazards. If we had a situation where there was a hazardous materials release in one area of the city and we had to move people to another area of the city for sheltering or for medical treatment, this is the type of plan that we could use. Those primarily designed after Katrina, in the post-Katrina New Orleans landscape, for evacuating people in advance of a major hurricane. And that's kind of what it's written around. It's a great plan. It was utilized in 2008 for Hurricane Gustav for the first time with great success. Over 22,000 people evacuated. We anticipate that there's potentially 30 to 40,000 residents at any one time who, for a number of reasons, but mainly, medical and mobility issues, as well as transportation and financial issues, are not going to be able to evacuate on their own. We rely on the fact that about 90% of our city's population is going to evacuate on their own. We encourage that if it becomes necessary, and we hope that that folks can make sure that they take care of clearly all their family members, their pets, but then also look out for neighbors and friends that may have challenges in doing the same. But knowing that we have a population, a need-based, vulnerable population that would need assistance in evacuating, we have created the city assisted evacuation. It's reviewed twice a year, once prior to June 1st, the traditional beginning of the Atlantic Basin hurricane season. And then we do another review August 1st, which is what we recognize as coming into August, September, and October, the height of the hurricane season generally for our area. We obviously have storms at any time of the year, potentially, but we know that June through November is our official hurricane season. And that in that 6-month period, August, September, and October are clearly the months that we are, I would say, the most, in a position where we are on guard. We have 17 evacu spots around the city. That's this statue. You probably have seen them around. It's 13-foot tall stainless steel statue. Along the back arm, it's a person hailing a bus. Along the back arm is signage that has instructions on what the city assisted evacuation is and kind of some of the ground rules of catching a bus from this location. So initially, for about 10 years, we had these 17 locations around the city marked with these statues. They are, for the most part, RTA bus stops. In fact, a lot of the work that went into this was based around RTA ridership and other socioeconomic indicators that we had out in the community. We worked with the University of New Orleans on this for quite a few years when this was developed. It basically identifies bus stops in the city that are of heavy use by folks that have indicated that public transportation is their primary form of transportation, which makes sense, right? Because we're probably going to have to help people who don't have a vehicle and that use public transportation as their primary mode of transportation. So that's kind of the thought process behind it. We've kind of adapted this in the last 2 years based on kind of some of the exercises and training we were doing regarding really quite enough. So we worked with the Regional Transit Authority, which is a really key partner in this. And we now have it set up where, yes, we have these 17 locations that are marked by the statues around the city. But really, when it comes down to it, if we have to enact this, if we have to activate an evacuation scenario in the city, we're going to use every bus stop. And then every bus that runs on that schedule is going to make one stop last stop downtown at the Smoothie King Center, which is our recognized by the state and the federal government as our primary pickup point for evacuating folks out of the city. And that is accomplished primarily by motor coach buses provided by the state of Louisiana, and then also aviation as far as military, what they call gray tail aircraft, military aircraft, as well as chartered civilian aircraft that would fly out of New Orleans International Airport. And that program is a very complex program that is run by the Department of Defense, Northcom, and FEMA. And then we have an agreement that the city worked out with Amtrak that takes their existing trains that they have and moves folks from the Union Passenger Terminal, which conveniently is right across Howard Avenue in the back there from the Smoothie King Center, and moves them to an area north of the city by about an hour, Tangipahoa Parish, where then buses would come in and pick them up. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, Amtrak wanted to be involved in this. They wanted to support evacuation by a proven method that rail, which could be successful. And then also what it does is it allows those many of those motor coach buses that the state provides, keeps them up north of I-12, making it a lot easier when contraflow kicks in, which I'll go over in a second, to move people in buses and to not have to have those buses come all the way back into the city to do turns every time we're trying to move people. I'm focusing quite a bit on the city assisted evacuation because it's really top of our mind every year, particularly with the timeline of storms that we've been seeing over the past few years. We traditionally, if you look at this timeline, we're asking for the mayor to call for mandatory evacuation about 72 hours before landfall. That's a long time. And quite frankly, we haven't had that amount of time. So there is some flexibility and scalability built into this. We were actually able to use a form of this after post-Ida and do a post-storm evacuation, which I think is the future of what we're doing is a hybrid of both pre-storm evacuation of our most vulnerable residents, seniors, those with mobility issues, and then for more of the general population, we may have a situation just based purely on timeline that the storm is going to have to pass, and then we're going to have to do a post-storm evacuation that would look very similar to what we would do pre-storm. A big part of our messaging and how we get the word out to the public about what we would have to do is through NolaReady. And I would encourage anyone on this on the webinar here, please check us out online at ready.nola.gov. You can also follow us on social media at NolaReady. We're on all these platforms. I'm certainly not, but many people are. But we're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Nextdoor. And we really utilize these platforms and this mouthpiece that we have with NolaReady to try and get folks, both residents and people who visit our city, the most real-time and up-to-date information that could affect them in the event of a major incident or, certainly a special event. Like I said, not all of this is negative. Certainly a lot of our job here at NOSEP is focused on disasters, but like I said, we've created some other things, which I'll go over here, other avenues for the folks, both visitors and residents, to engage with us and learn information about the event or the incident that's going on. We work very hard not to waste people's time. We stay as above the fray of politics as possible. We don't promote programs just because the city's doing them. They have to have a nexus and they have to have a basis in public safety and disaster preparedness, because that's what this office is about. So we do engage with the community on a large scale, both through some of these technological pieces like social media and the web. But we also, and my preferred method is, particularly with hurricanes, is to meet with people in person, neighborhood groups, faith-based groups, business leaders, business organizations. I have a Louisiana Bankers Association coming to meet with us in about a week or two, and we talk about a lot of these things and how they can be prepared, how banks can be prepared for disasters. Many of them have a lot of plans, and we're happy to review those and look them over. Some have, needs or requests, and we're certainly happy to take a look at those and see where we can fit in and where we can help. But we typically are managed to do about 200 to 300 in-person disaster preparedness events per year. These can be tabling, they can be hurricane awareness presentations. We do a lot of training in the community. We can, if you have a group that is interested in active shooter prevention preparedness training, we teach the run, hide, fight FEMA standard that both FEMA and the FBI uses as well. If you're interested in CPR, hands-only CPR, stop the bleed training, which is tourniquet training, we do a lot of these. And in fact, we've adapted these trainings. We've worked with Mardi Gras crews on some of these trainings. We've worked with other special event coordinators or organizers to try and, we've worked with Zulu in the past, both their crew for Mardi Gras and the club itself, the Social Aid and Pleasure Club, to try and educate their membership on CPR and on what to look for with an active aggressor, like an active shooter type scenario. And we're certainly willing to do that with anyone. As a matter of fact, at our website, ready.nola.gov, you can sign up for those trainings, and we will have one of our staff come and perform those. And we work those both with our in-house NolaReady team, which we have 3 full-time employees in NolaReady. We have an additional couple of AmeriCorps Vistas. And interns. We have a pretty robust internship program in my office that I'm very proud of. That we will take college-age unpaid college-age students and integrate them into our operation, and including helping us during events. And people have gotten some really good experience from that. We'll try and get those folks all the training and that they want to do while they're working with us. And we've actually hired a few based off of their time as either interns or vistas. And I know that that my counterparts in other cities have hired folks from my office as well that have participated in this. And so, NolaReady is something that the mayor spoke to me about when she offered me this position, about being engaged with the community from a disaster preparedness standpoint. And so NolaReady has really been one of our hallmark priorities in the last 5 years. One thing I'll say too is that we have the ability to send alerts through your smart device, typically phones. And the way you can do that very quickly is you can text NolaReady, one word, NolaReady, to 77295. If you look at our website again, you can actually set up an account. You can be a little more choosy about the kind of alerts you want to receive, the kind of information you want to see from us. But when we send out alerts, it's typically something that I think most people would find pretty valuable. If there's something going on where there's streets closed or roads closed due to public safety activity, fire, large crime scene, unfortunately happens. If we have a mass casualty type incident, any type of severe issues going on with roadways and things, we can push those out through our messaging system. We have over 300,000 folks that have voluntarily opted in for these alerts. Now, not all of them are in New Orleans. Many of them are in our metro area, which is about 1.3 million people. But in a city of about 460,000, to have 300,000 signed up for your alerts, I'm feeling pretty good about our ability to get the word out to people. So those are kind of the ways, preparedness is training, it's exercising, it's public communication and notification and public information. And so those are kind of some of the things that we do. Moving on to response, we have an emergency operations center in the city, which is really, it's a coordination center. It's a place where people coordinate. I think this picture kind of, what I like about this picture is, you know, an activation, an EOC activation, as we refer to it, does not have to be 60 to 80 people per 12-hour shift in the emergency operations center with just a massive hum of activity. Is it like that during a Super Bowl? Yes. Is it like that during a hurricane like Hurricane Ida? Absolutely. And people are there 24 hours a day. They sleep in the building, they eat in the building, and they work their shifts from 7A to 7P or 7P to 7A. And we've been fortunate enough to have folks from mosquito control in our EOC with us, people from infrastructure, from NOPD, from all of our different city agencies, as you can imagine, all have representatives, what we call liaisons, that come up to the office. They're trained in how to, you know, kind of manage their time. They're trained in the incident command system into who to report to, what type of information they should be looking for, what type of information they should be putting out, and they do that. But this, in the picture there on the slide, was a wind and rainstorm that came up right before Bayou Boogaloo, which is a big festival on Bayou St. John, wiped out a bunch of the setup and tents that had gone on that day for Bayou Boogaloo, which was supposed to start the next morning. And this kind of shows the mayor's there, the CAO's there. We've got about 10 key people that are up in the room. This is not necessarily everyone, but this is how objectives are made and how decisions are made about how to, you know, clean up, clear up an incident or a situation that occurred. And so we did have some damage out there. Fortunately, no one was hurt. We were able to work with sanitation and public works to get all of the areas around that. We had a couple trees come down in this case specifically, able to get those addressed. And Bayou Boogaloo was able to open the next day on time. And look, a lot of credit to them as well. They are the ones that were able to kind of get back in there and reset up a lot of these tents. And, you know, it was pretty devastating there for about an hour or two. But they were able to get all of that back together and reopen on time and have their festival for that weekend. And so that kind of shows you the scalability that we have with an emergency operations center. We can have 5 people working a very small incident within an hour or two, or we can have, as we did in Hurricane Ida, 60 to 80 people per shift working for 16 days nonstop in this facility. And so we're on the 9th floor of City Hall. And, you know, that's, and then another thing about the photo at the bottom, you see all of these from left to right, you see city agencies, you see state agencies, you see the National Guard, the state police, and then you see federal agencies that we frequently work with. And I think that kind of shows anyone can have a seat at this table, depending on the incident. And that's the idea behind the incident command system and the unified command, is that you bring not necessarily the highest ranking, who has the most stars on their shoulder. Obviously, that's important for leadership. But when you're talking about trying to respond to and recover from accomplish objectives. We can take our show on the road if we have to. We have a command vehicle. You know, many of the public safety agencies have command vehicles for certain, you know, for certain elements of their work. You know, EMS has a large surge bus that can take up to 14 patients. It's basically a command, looks like a command center, but it's like a full service ambulance, ALS ambulance that can carry 14, 20 people. You know, the New Orleans Police Department has a few of these different command vehicles used for, you know, their different tactical operations and things like that. Our command vehicle is specifically designed to be a mobile command center. So it has communications capabilities in it, and it has a conference room capabilities in it. And so we can seat people in there. We can have unified command meetings. We can determine you know, what's going on the ground, determine objectives, and then communicate those objectives out to the field. We set this up for a lot of different things, you know, tornadoes, We set it up for Mardi Gras, larger special events. We will have a mobile command presence there. French Quarter Fest is another one, big one that we set up for. But we do have the ability to be mobile with this command and control. It's part of our, public safety crisis and consequence management. We also have the city's real-time crime center. We have over 500 city-owned cameras at this point around the city that are monitored from a secure monitoring facility. One of the things we've done, because we do listen, and we know that there's privacy concerns out there. I certainly share some of those concerns. So, one of the things that we do that I think we learned that we saw that we wanted to have it as a priority in our real-time and our crime center from other cities that we saw. We went and looked at some other cities that do this type of camera monitoring systems. We wanted it to be fully integrated into our 911 system. And so what we do that might be a little different than other cities is we take the 911 calls that come in for violent crimes, and it automatically figures out that location, and it tells that technician that's on the slide there, it tells them what camera to look at, like right now. It says there is a report of an armed robbery going on within 1/10 of a mile of this camera, and it allows that technician to then take that camera, manipulate it, see if they can locate anything going on. And many times we can catch the lead up to the crime, if not the crime itself. And then, very importantly, the aftermath of the crime, including the direction of flight, if something happened and the person got in a vehicle and then, made good some sort of getaway. And so we've been able to actually track down the suspects in these crimes from these cameras. And in many cases provide video evidence that is 4K and pretty irrefutable. I'll just say I would think that with these cameras, people would stop committing crimes under them, but they don't, which is amazing to me, because we have contributed, I believe, a lot of evidence to the criminal justice system, to the district attorney, and to the courts that have secured convictions. So when people ask if the crime center is a deterrent to crime, I think the jury might be out on that. I think that the cameras with the red and blue flashing lights, that was kind of something that we saw that they did in Memphis, and we thought that would be something that we wanted to do here to kind of let people know that the cameras are there. But surprisingly or not surprisingly, the cameras have become part of, I guess, kind of the background, and we still have crime, so we're still able to assist with that. And I think that that's one thing that I like to talk about in these talks, is that there's no way that any one person can monitor 500 cameras at one time. It does rely on some technology and some, to be smart about how you're using people's time and how to best maximize what we can do. The other thing it does is it does create somewhat of a force multiplier for the police department, which we all know they're having struggles with keeping numbers. I don't think that's a secret. We do have less police officers than we did last year and 5 years ago. And so what this does is it allows for these technicians to, identify, find these videos, upload them, save them in an evidentiary database, and it allows the police to continue policing. And I think that that's an important point of discussion when we talk about cameras and the use of that type of technology. Another thing that that I think is really important about these cameras is, I was able to put a little bit of say into where they were located. For some of them, we do rely heavily on the NOPD, because these are our primary customer, if you will, is the New Orleans Police Department, and really trying to have an effect and a deterrent on crime is important. But in some areas, I was able to get cameras established in areas that typically we tend to see flooding. And so we're able to kind of monitor real time when we do have large rain events and severe weather. We're able to monitor many of these locations around the city and determine kind of where we're at on the ground with the weather. And, you know, as a matter of fact, these technicians have gotten really good at seeing, you know, when catch basins and storm drains are clogged, and at times they have full radio communication. They're able to dispatch to Public Works real time that they're witnessing a street flooding due to a clogged storm drain. And if the conditions are safe enough, those vac trucks can go out and actually clear that up immediately. And that has been that has made a huge impact on some of our ability to address some of the infrastructure challenges I talked about at the beginning of the webinar. One of the things that we were able to work with the state on after Katrina was a truly interoperable communication system statewide, because it was a huge gap during Katrina. You know, we were very much limited with our ability to communicate. The state worked with Motorola and designed the Louisiana Wireless Information Network, or LWIN. We currently have over 112,000 subscribers. This slide hasn't been updated. I keep meaning to do it and I keep forgetting. 112,000 subscribers to LWIN. It's pretty much every public safety agency in the state of Louisiana has access to this and uses it on a daily basis. You know, the New Orleans Police Department, New Orleans Fire Department, Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office, every police agency, sheriff's agency, and fire agency, and emergency medical agency in the state uses this. It's the most robust statewide interoperability system in the country, and I would say probably in the world at this point. Other states have tried to do this. Michigan would probably be about the closest, but no one, I think we are in a situation where we have a perfect sized state and geography, meaning relatively flat, in order to do this. You know, we're able to actually use 27 towers throughout the state of Louisiana, and I've driven all the way to northern Arkansas and still been able to communicate with my folks in New Orleans on our radio system, which is pretty incredible. That's far beyond the design. So they really have built something that is pretty special. It's been tested many times. Hurricanes Delta, Laura, the floods in 2016 in Baton Rouge, Hurricane Zeta and Ida that affected us, many other events, cyber attacks, both not just New Orleans, but there have been some statewide and state agency cyber attacks over the last 3 years. We've lost sites due to flooding and due to hurricanes, and it is still worked statewide regardless, and it's a great system. And there's no user fees. That's another great thing. The state doesn't charge us to use it. Our only requirement is that whatever towers are in our parish, we maintain, which we do. We have 2 towers in Orleans Parish, and we maintain them as part of our normal maintenance schedule that we do for all of our communications equipment. We have an additional radio system in the city that we built for our non-public safety teams, infrastructure, the jails, other situations where we need to have backup radio system. Our backup radio system also can, with a flip of a switch, can integrate into LWIN should it be needed. And so we've got a lot of redundancy there with communications. So I mentioned some of the things that we do with NolaReady, and a lot of that has to do with our emergency and special event alerting. You know, we do have the ability to send a text to everyone's phone, should we have to, similar to what you see with a National Weather Service alert or an Amber alert. You know, that's the what I call the really annoying sound that comes through your phone sometimes. Hopefully not in the middle of the night all the time, but I think you know the sound I'm talking about. We have the ability to do that too. I will say that that's heavily, as it should be, it's heavily tracked, and there's a lot of accountability with that. So if we were to send one, you know, we would hear about it from the federal government. They'd want to know why. The last one we sent that was an emergency, what we call a wireless emergency alert, was during Hurricane Ida. but we'd send them for other things. When we detonated the cranes at the Hard Rock site, we sent out a wireless emergency alert for that. I remember that specifically because we wanted people to get inside while these cranes were going to be demolished. That's one aspect of it. The other is, I mentioned that 300,000 folks that can opt in. You know, the opt-in, we send out alerts, you know, not often, but often enough that we kind of become part of the, you know, we hope that we become part of people's trusted kind of sources of information. You know, if there is a major fire going on where there's streets blocked and things like that, we're going to give you a perimeter, and we're just going to say, look, there's a big fire here, please avoid the area. And I think that's helpful. You know, it keeps people out of the area, lets the responders do what they need to do. It also prevents kind of the headaches that we've all experienced, getting backed up in traffic or trying to get somewhere and having kind of the whole world all over the place in the street and realizing there's something going on here that I really don't want to be around. And so it's helpful. Another thing we do, like I said, for special events, we don't want to just be the purveyor of bad news. We'd like to also share good news. And so we do RouteWise, which is routewise.nola.gov. We're able to track real time. It started with Mardi Gras parades, but now it's major parades, road races, any type of non-static special event. In other words, something that has a course or a route, we're able to track. And we put trackers with NOPD at the head and the tail of these events, whether it be a Mardi Gras parade or whether it be a marathon or something of that nature. And we're able to show that real time. Mardi Gras, we're able to actually show where all the public restrooms are, where the first aid stations are, where all the food vendors are located. You know, some really good lost children stations. We're able to kind of graphically show all of that. And it is a mobile optimized website, so you can pull it up on your phone, and it's really helpful. Another is weatherwise.nola.gov. If you see a trend here, WeatherWise is a system of weather stations around the city that we've installed, and they have real-time webcams that show the horizon in that area, and a number of different weather points that we think people find helpful. Temperature, heat index, if you were around this weekend, wind chill, rainfall, rain rate, all wind speed and direction, all sorts of different things. And so it's just another ability. You know, one of our big goals here is for people to be weather aware. Whether you're going to go to City Park and have a barbecue, or whether you're planning on going to some sort of outdoor festival, look at the weather before you go. You know, and this is a really handy way that you can go to a website right from your phone or from your smart device or from your computer at home, and you can look up the weather in all different areas of the city. We've pretty much covered the city geographically in these weather stations. So that's another opportunity for us to engage with the public and provide the public the information they need to make safe decisions for themselves. We also rely heavily and are very proud of our volunteer force. We have the NolaReady Volunteer Corps. We have over 4,000 people signed up for NolaReady Volunteer Corps, and over 1,000 of them have actually been trained. During COVID in 2021, we did over 17,000 hours of volunteer. Our volunteers did 17,000 hours of service in the city. One of the things we saw from COVID, we had a volunteer program prior to COVID, mainly used for hurricanes and hurricane evacuation, as it still is. However, COVID brought out a lot of new volunteers and a lot of new efforts to assist us with vaccinations and with testing when that was ongoing, and with community outreach and knocking on doors and just, you know, helping people in the community, bringing the elderly and our seniors food so that they wouldn't have to go out and you know, potentially expose themselves during the early stages of COVID. A lot of really strong work that was done by these volunteers. And so now we've asked them, obviously, if you're willing to help for COVID, would you be willing to assist us with hurricane evacuation and assisting with that? So we were able to leverage a lot of our volunteers during Hurricane Ida in the aftermath, when we set up all of the 8 cooling centers or emergency resource centers around the city and our different NORD recreation facilities. A lot of those were staffed by volunteers and NORD employees, and the NORD employees supervised our volunteers, who just helped provide a friendly face and a neon green vest to our public out there, getting them food, water, some limited medical treatment where we could arrange it, or at least evaluation, prescriptions, things like that. And it's just been, it's been great all the way around. Volunteerism is something that we strongly encourage and will always aim for. I will say that when you're working with volunteerism, it's difficult to plan around a number. Typically you have to hire out for or ask out for about, double what will actually end up ultimately being able to make it for whatever reason. And so it's a great add-on if we have it. This is some of those details about NolaReady. Moving on to recovery. So my office coordinates after the response. We work to coordinate initial damage assessments, and we'll send out teams of our own folks from hazard mitigation that are already starting to look at, what the major effects were and starting to kind of formulate in their heads a plan on, how are we going to mitigate this? What are we going to do next time to see that this doesn't happen again? And that starts literally as soon as the dust is settled or the winds have died down, and that's how seriously we take it. We have to start looking at these things right away. We also work with our different public safety agencies, police, fire, and EMS all go out and do what we call windshield surveys, where they go out and just through driving and limited assessment, they can start looking at traffic signals, debris in roadways, collapsed structures in danger of collapse. We have safety and permits and code enforcement go out and start looking at city assets, city buildings, city properties to see where they're at. And then we start a very robust public information campaign to refer people to start documenting and assessing their own damage on their residences through several different websites, some locally here. One, damage.la.gov has become very important as far as we can know with the public's help in just documenting their own damage, we can know within a day or two whether or not we're going to make a threshold towards Stafford Act and reimbursement and a lot of those federal programs that are out there to help. One of the things that we've noticed lately is when we have things like these tornadoes and the freeze event over Christmas that many of you remember. These are smaller events that have effects on our people, no doubt, but they're also we're kind of on our own with them. And so, part of our priority this year is determining maybe there's some better ways of being able to coordinate some of these things when a disaster is big enough that you have people that are out of their homes, but small enough that that the state and the federal government is not going to have a role in it. And then look, they come in for the big stuff, not so much for the small stuff. And when I say small stuff, I'm not downplaying the seriousness of that most recent tornado to the 12 families that lost their home. What I'm saying is that it was very encapsulated to one area of the city, and it becomes incumbent on the city to address these things. And this kind of goes into that, what we talk about with our, in recovery, we talk about working with state and federal government. A lot of that has to do around reimbursement and about public and individual assistance through FEMA that can come in the form of temporary sheltering, temporary housing. It can come in the form of some financial assistance. One of the main things I tell folks in any call I'm on is, predominantly most of those programs go to folks that don't have insurance. So if you have insurance, please keep your insurance. It's very important. And then, as I mentioned, volunteer and donations. Again, what we saw through COVID and what we've seen in the past in hurricanes is that we have a very, very active volunteer and donations, volunteer organizations active in disasters is what we call them, VOADs. You know, when we think about these things, we think about Cajun Navy, think about the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, but there's smaller ones too locally here. Hands on New Orleans is one we work with quite frequently. These groups get out very quickly. They have they have good leadership, and they have very excited volunteer groups that want to work with them. They'll get out there very quickly in many cases, and I'll say in most cases, quicker than government. And they'll start doing things for the community, mucking out homes, putting tarps on roofs, providing food, meals, and different things like that. The issue becomes is that they burn themselves out relatively quickly. Volunteers have to get on with their lives. They run out of their donated resources. They run out of their donated money. And so for the first, week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks, I want to encourage them, the VOADs, the volunteers and donations that are assisting, to help as much as possible. In that time, we're working on getting the government solution, the government resources to fill in that gap once they start to naturally kind of close up. Then we go back to those VOADs and say, how can we help you get reestablished? You know, whether it be through supplies, whether it be through getting some of our own volunteers to assist in volunteering with their groups. So really, it's kind of it's a partnership as to who can help first, who can kind of pull up the slack and continue that help, and allow these other groups to kind of regroup and reinstitute themselves. And so it works quite well, and we're very lucky to have partners like that. We meet with them. We have a conference call during incidents. We typically don't need them that much for special events and things like that. Although Mardi Gras, we utilize volunteers, a large amount of volunteers for both first aid stations and this new recycling program we started this year. Recycling beads, we got almost 7 tons of beads off of the parade route this year by hand. And so look, it's probably a drop in the bucket compared to what's out there, but it's a start, and we're really proud of it. And they also took a lot of aluminum and glass off of the route as well, which is great. But that's kind of where we're at. I'm very much a proponent of volunteerism. And then mitigation. We know that this is the lake-borne surge barrier. Almost $15 billion worth of infrastructure spending on our hurricane and storm damage risk reduction system, our levee system, since Hurricane Katrina. So, we've had a system that has been tested a few times since, most recently in Ida. I think that we're in a better place now than certainly we were 16, 17 years ago. But, part of what my office does is that we work very closely with the Army Corps of Engineers and our state flood protection authorities to make sure that, one, that we know if there's anything we can do to assist them with information, communications, we do. And two is we want to make sure that the city and our residents have, that we have their backs in dealing with huge systems like this, and make sure that, when a citizen or a resident calls in and says, I see a leak in this levee, which happens, we get that out there and we have them address that. And many times one of our own staff members will go out with them because we're very serious about this. We want to make sure that these systems, I'm in a situation sometimes where a lot of the plans I have rely on assets that don't belong to me. And that always makes me a little nervous. So I always have to keep an extra eye on what we're doing and how we're planning, and maintaining those relationships with those other partners that this is their responsibility to maintain this system. We want to make sure that our voice is heard. So we've done over 400 home elevations in a decade. It's more than any other city has done in the country. We're the largest user of home elevation grants in the country. We'll continue to do these. There's obviously, it's a program that we put out once or twice a year, depending on the amount of money that's out there. It's pretty much, it depends on what FEMA is able to contribute towards mitigation, home elevation grant funding. There are requirements. It's not something you just call up and they come and raise your house. Obviously, it's the federal government, so there's a ton of requirements. But we walk you through that process. Our team walks you through that process. We get you onto the list, and when the funding becomes available for whatever project year, it's 100% reimbursable to elevate your home 1 to 3 feet above base flood elevation. And we have never had a property that we've elevated in 10 years flood again. And that is saying something. Properties still flood, but they weren't elevated. The ones that were elevated, they've done quite well. And that's because the engineering's there. We know from the engineering, from the mapping, how far up to raise something. And then you give it a couple extra feet above that just in case. And they've done really well. Now, this is predominantly for residences, for residential properties, but we have worked with some historic properties that are businesses, and we've managed to get them into this grant program. And to my knowledge, that's been a first. Again, there's some specific uniqueness around those as far as being historical properties and National Historic Registry and things like that. I don't think any business can do it, but if you have one of these types of unique properties, give us a call, let us know. One of the big mitigation projects that we continue to both add to and maintain is all of our public safety buildings in the city are on whole building generators. Some are diesel, some are natural gas, some are hybrid. One of my priorities, my goals in this role is that any new generator that goes on a building for the city of New Orleans is hybrid. It can take either diesel or natural gas. In years past, that was not an option. A lot of times it just kind of depends on how these programs develop over a few years. And one of those things now is, yes, we're doing hybrid wherever we can. I think you'll see in the future a lot emphasis on solar battery power, potentially wind power, but I know that there's facilities in the city that are taking it on themselves. Many faith-based and houses of worship are starting to install and are receiving credits and federal programming for installing solar battery cells on their churches and their houses of worship that then can be used as a place to congregate post-storm. And we're working with many of them that have identified themselves through these programs to support them. If I have a house of worship that is willing to take in a couple hundred people to make sure they're all right after a storm when we have a power outage, I'm happy to get over there to give them as much water and ice and food and everything that we can get them so they can help their community as well. And I think it's great. And so that's something that we're working on as well. So wind refitting of buildings, putting on better roofs, better windows, and then generators are a big part of our priorities around city facilities. A flood warning system installed around the city. We have 12 sites. They're located at underpasses. This is the one on Marconi. Marconi facing City Park. And so you see what we have is a pressure sensor at the bottom of the underpass. All these underpasses have drainage pumps as well. But many times heavy rain and that location being, the underpass location will start to collect water really quickly. And so what we'll do is we have a pressure sensor that's in that. Once the water reaches 4 inches, it sets off an alarm in our office. It sets off lights, flashing red lights, and indicates don't drive through it. People still drive through it. It's another one of those things I just don't get. I mean, I kind of do get it, but if it gets bad enough, we can dispatch police and fire there, whoever gets there first, to put up barricades. If it's enough that, you know, we really need to make sure people don't drive through it. But the warning enough should be, has helped us out a lot with the inadvertent folks driving into a situation that maybe they can't drive out of. And that's important. Also, all these are weather stations as well. They collect all the weather data, and that's all part of that WeatherWise system. Green infrastructure and resilience projects. The city has an Office of Resilience and Sustainability. We work closely with them on the mitigation side. Many times, what starts as an idea in their office, they are some grand dreamers. What starts as an idea in their office can come to fruition through a grant program for mitigation grant funding. And so what you see here is the I don't like renaming neighborhoods in New Orleans, but the Pontilly Swale. This was lots that never came back after Katrina. They were city owned. And so what we've done here is created a green space that actually, once water, if you look down in the lower left corner, you see the storm drain. Once that storm drain is overrun, it bypasses the water into the structure, which then holds the water for an amount of time. And I know Claudia is probably gritting her teeth right now because she loves me and my swales and my mosquito collecting rain barrels programs. But if they're done appropriately, they work. There was, you know, obviously some in the neighborhood were not too keen on this initially. And then we saw the reversal in street flooding that occurred not just on this street, but within like a 4 or 5 block radius of this. And we knew that, you know, we were onto something. So I would say that you're going to see more of these projects in the future. Not all of them are as outward facing as this. Many of them, like when we did at Dillard University, we actually are able to bury the huge retention tanks underground. Where the water is collected there, and then over the course of 72 to 96 hours, it's allowed to kind of permeate into the soil. If you could say we have soil down here, but it is able to get back into the ground. What this is really is all about changing our relationship with water. That's because we're not gonna beat the water. You know, we have to learn to kind of adapt, and you know, whether we're seeing faster hurricanes or slower hurricanes or more powerful hurricanes, I think the best way it was put to me was by the Louisiana State climatologist, and that is that, you know, it's not really a matter of more or less occurrences. It's when the occurrences do happen, they're not as predictable. You know, we used to know we're going to get a heavy rain for about an hour, and you know, there's going to be some street flooding, and now we're seeing just some crazy stuff sometimes with the rain, and you know, 8-10 inches an hour rainfall rate for an hour, and that's a massive amount of rain. So anything we can do to try and educate the public and assist the public in kind of defining their relationship with water, aka rain, I think is important. And I'll stick around for any questions. That's the end of my presentation, and I hope you found it useful. Kind of gives you an idea of where we're at and what we're doing. It's, you know, connecting with the public and communicating, finding avenues for the public and for our fellow agencies and departments to, you know, maybe find some unique grant opportunities and funding for projects that they believe in that will make a difference, and supporting our first responders and public safety. And thank you.
Collin, thank you so much. This is absolutely actually phenomenal overview of what you all do, which I think is really great. And so I think anyone who is watching your presentation today it's such a huge scope, right, of responsibilities that can be natural disasters to vector-borne to everything in between. You know, and hazard mitigation involved in so many things. So I think it was really just great.
And,
I'm so
and
glad
if
that
I
you
could
touched on
say,
mosquitoes, right?
yeah, let me add that though, because I think it's important to note, like, working with you, working with Jen in the health department with the pandemic, I think there's still a ways to go. But I think through the pandemic, for those that maybe were doubters, public health is public safety. They're related, and so when I do all these, I may be concentrating on houses being elevated and us trying to get out of the way of water, but all of this applies towards the public health and vector-borne challenges that we will see out there in the future. And so,
Absolutely. It's all related.
I think that chapter is still being written. Quite
It
frankly.
is. And,
I
to
don't
be
think the
honest,
ink's
Colin, I
dry.
think what really brought everybody together was Zika virus. So I think Zika
Yeah.
virus, because so many of us seem to work in silos, right? But I really do believe that when Zika virus came, we didn't have established a local transmission that was detected, but it was so many different departments that were working together. And I will say, I don't think everyone knows, but mosquito control, mosquito, rodent, and termite control actually falls under the umbrella of Homeland Security, right, at the city of New Orleans. And so honestly, for a program like ours, it's a really great place to be because the communication is somewhat, I would say, seamless, right? Pick up the phone, here it is. We know what's going on. There's regular meetings. We're at the table. So it really, I think, really helps on the being able to deliver those services and do the prevention work as well, right? If it's from the green infrastructure, for example. So we have a seat at the table on that. So I think it's really important. And
And
anyway,
I don't like to call them silos. I like to refer to them as individual capsules of excellence.
well, that sounds much nicer. But again, it's
It's a
getting
joke.
everybody
It's a
at that
joke.
table. I like it.
It's a joke. No
Uh,
silos.
no silos, no silos. And so I think we have a couple of comments in there. I don't know, Stacia, do you want to go through and read? We had a comment from Bridge House, Grace, that made a comment, but I don't see any questions. But folks, now's the time to put your questions in for Colin.
Yeah, I have a question for Colin. I kind of know because I do come to the EOC on behalf of Mosquito, but could you please speak on the different levels of activation? Like for instance, when it would be all hands on deck or just, certain departments, like how do you make that determination and what are the levels?
No, that's a great question. So we have 4 levels. Today we are at level 4, which is normal operations. That's what we call blue sky days. It's pretty nice out. Always ready, but we're able to kind of stand down, and we have normal business hours like any office at City Hall, and so that's kind of our normal activation level. We step up one to a level 3, which is what we also, we love our acronyms. It's a CAT team, a crisis action team. That photo I had in the slide deck of the smaller activation where it was the mayor and the CAO and a couple other, city department heads, myself, that's a crisis action team. That's we have the sufficient amount of people within the NOSEP staff and within kind of the leadership to monitor what would be a smaller type of event or situation. Another example of a CAT team activation would be we're the only city in the country that activates for all NFL home games, Saints games, and we started that after the Super Bowl. And that's just an extra set of eyes. We really do it just for the traffic, and clearing up any issues around the Superdome before and after the game. That's kind of where we're at there. That would be a level 3. Moving up from that, you have a level 2, which is a partial activation, which is much more. It starts getting bigger. You start filling out your emergency operations center a little bit more. Really, what we're trying to do is scale the incident, scale our response to the incident, and ideally, you're like maybe 2 steps higher. And so, I don't necessarily need the U.S. postal inspectors to be activated for a Saints game. And in fact, I probably don't even need them for a hurricane. But if there is an incident like a white powder incident or one of these types of situations that we've seen over the years where their expertise would be valuable, we maintain those contacts so we can call them up and say, hey, we've got this type of incident. We're going to be activating our EOC. Would you send somebody up here to assist us? And 9 times out of 10, it's absolutely be there in 10 minutes, be there in an hour, you know? And so we can kind of pick and choose from almost like an a la carte menu of different agencies about who we need for certain things. And the idea behind this is we're not here to waste people's time and we're not here to burn people out. So if I don't need you for an incident at a certain period in time, you know, you can go and we'll call you when we need you, because we don't want to create a situation where we've run out of people. And that's what leads to the level 1 activation, which is a full activation. And that's, you know, putting everybody in the seat. And those are reserved mainly for, you know, major hurricanes, in my experience, the pandemic in the beginning, the cyber attack in the beginning, and then major special events, your Super Bowls, your NCAA Final Fours, your Essence Fests, you know, those types of large events. So it's 1 through 4, 1 being the oh crap, bad, and 4 being kind of normal operations.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, like you said, if you have any questions that you come up with later, I'm happy to answer them. You can email the education@nola.gov, and or just, you know, hit someone at mosquito control and they'll be able to get that back to me.
For sure. Collin, thank you so much. And again, you know, people that are watching this webinar or watching it future on our YouTube channel, if there's a particular topic that they would like to see, you know, just make sure you let us know. We want to hear from everybody, and so we can sort of fill everybody's needs. I do want to say that you can follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're always posting great information about, it could be mosquito control, rodent control tips, all kinds of things, but also a lot of the other webinars and educational opportunities that are, you know, we're providing. And again, as a quick reminder, this is just part 1 of a 3-part series. So if you're interested, please register, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Collin, thank you again. We appreciate your time so much. And thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye.